One of the things I've thought about for quite some time has been the question of the limits of male disposability. Now, male disposability is a real thing in the sense that it is historically, archaeologically, and now increasingly genetically attested. We have, for example, genetic data from various parts of the world, in particular from Europe, that indicate that sometimes 90% of entire male lineages disappeared in a very brief period of time when push came to shove and they came in contact with other males. And the archaeological data are there, and it's just an observable thing, essentially. And when we look at the current modern mating market, it really begs the question, is there a limit to the very concept of male disposability? Historically, there kind of was. We have to think about the way technology and the environment has shifted. There was a time when every able-bodied man was necessary in some sense in order to get things done. And so there was a vested interest to train them, to have people take them under their wing, to get the things done that needed to get done. Of course, they were still disposable. They would still be the first sent off to croak in a war and things of that nature. But because of the interdependencies at the level of community and society, it was required that people invest time in males and that they pay attention to their needs and interests to varying degrees. We fast forward to the current year, and that's very much not the case. There are untold hordes, swaths of invisible men that are quietly going about their lives, sometimes contented, sometimes not so contented. But no one would argue that these individuals are necessary because A, they don't belong to any community that needs them, and B, the world has shifted fundamentally. Technology, modernization, the mechanization effect, all these things have taken place that have changed the arc of history and, more importantly, changed the fate of individual human beings, more specifically of men. And that all coupled by the fact that people are finally paying attention to the incongruities that exist between men and women, specifically on the mating and dating market, makes for a very interesting scenario. Because as I pointed out many times, as many of you have pointed out, usually when they're talking about these things with respect to men and women, they're always focused on the women's issues. But the problem here is that there's still a degree of interconnectivity, which is to say that women might have an issue finding appropriate partners. But at the same time, they can't ignore the fact that they still want to be together with men. We're not seeing a mass lesbification of women. If that were the case, I think they would be Gucci, as they say. They would be all right. No, they still want male partners. They just don't find enough that are suitable or satisfying to them. Because as I pointed out in a recent video, there simply aren't enough quote-unquote good men to go around. So some women, even if they're quote-unquote quality women, are going to lose out. And the question then emerges, what do you do about that? Do we transform society into a giant harem? Do we introduce new social policies? Well, that's almost certainly not going to happen. I'd almost be willing to bet money that most women in the modern world would be deeply dissatisfied being one of, say, a dozen wives to a few of the ultra chads out there. I don't think that's going to be an option. And so in some sense, we arrive back in a situation that is somewhat similar to the picture I painted initially in this video, which is to say, initially you had to invest time and energy in men because they were, at the end of the day, important cogs for the community. They were necessary. You might not have liked it, you might not have liked them, but you kind of needed to spend the time and energy doing so. And so there could be some kind of silver lining in the form of all this disposability simply because of women's needs and wishes. Because, as I've said several times, it's very unlikely that women are going to be satisfied being one of a handful or a dozen or 20 wives to some ultra chad and the rest be damned. No, they still are interested largely in so-called monogamous relationships and that sort of thing. But when there's not enough to go around and the mainstream sources are paying attention to this now, there could be some serious issues. What may result from all of this might be some kind of new social policy, nothing radical, that might help men get off their feet, might help men get the things done that are necessary to be quote-unquote objects of attraction to women. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but that is a possibility, because this could continue ad infinitum, assuming women were satisfied with the situation. But as long as women are not satisfied with the situation, there's going to be a problem. And of course, they're blaming men. It's men's fault that they're broke and ineffectual and stupid and whatever. But even granting all of that, even saying, yeah, you're right, men are all these things, blah, 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 you still have this fundamental issue that there is a shortage in the supply chain. And who's going to rush in there to fill those gaps? Again, we're not going to restructure Western society to turn it into a nomadic, desert-dwelling, harem-operating, polygamous state of affairs. That's almost certainly not going to happen. So the only other alternative is to start investing more time, energy, and indeed money in male interests and male youth, broadly speaking, in order that they, quote-unquote, become, in air quotes, useful to the women in society. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but it is a possibility, a slight possibility that is emerging on the horizon as we observe the trends day by day, week by week, month by month, year by year. If there are not enough, quote-unquote, good men to go around for the women, then that's a problem, and it needs to be addressed somehow. And further allowing the male side of things to slip into dilapidation and to get worse and worse and worse isn't going to be a solution to the worries they have for the sake of women. And that, in short, is an answer to the question of what are the limits of male disposability. I think it's an interesting question, and I think the possible answer to that question is the limits of male disposability are the limits of what women are able to tolerate at the level of mate access and general life satisfaction, at least in a large-scale, quote-unquote, globalized economy and society. Back in the day, centuries ago, millennia ago, things were quite different. But all the complaining about how terrible men are. You remember that anchor woman last year who referred to men as trash? Well, sure, she might view men that way, and maybe many women do, but they're still not going to get the guys that they want to get unless they want to share and become part of a harem. So you can't have your cake and eat it too. At some point in time, something needs to give, and it won't be because men are in a state of crisis or suffering. It will be because women are most affected, as is conventionally typically the case. And I'm not sure if you can view that as a silver lining, but it is something. And that, of course, then begs the question, the entirely new question, if they're interested in helping you out just because women are worried about their own lot, is it even worth bothering and paying attention to? Well, I leave that to the individual man. Everyone, thanks for tuning in. As always, please hit the like button, subscribe. If you're not yet a subscriber, please hit that bell icon, because YouTube does not share my videos with most people. Share the video. And if I'm still alive, I'll check you out later. I pray that the gods watch over you. Take care and bye-bye. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.